The Grasshopper was deemed an inadequate vehicle for our mission to save Kattegat. Since we were going to war, we needed something tough, maneuverable, and mechanically simple, and with room for a possible payload, so we were assigned the C-130-based mail service. It had essentially been converted to live up to its name, doing package deliveries to the colonies, but it was armed with the sunlight cannon, and its fold drive had been calibrated for long-range service by aligning it with Grasshoppers. Instead of a chemical rocket RCS, it sported a new microfold sunlight reaction system which used water superheated by the same process as the power generators and sunlight cannon to produce significant thrust and impulse. It was a cargo model with a large cargo area and the usual C-130 big rear door, and when we got to it we found a uniformed Air Force captain waiting for us by a rather provocative object which was mounted in the cargo hold for transport. "Is that what it looks like?" Em asked incredulously. It was about 6 feet long and conical, tapering from a base about a half a meter across to a rounded tip. "Of course. It's your hydrogen bomb. To be precise, a W-88 ICBM re-entry vehicle with a yield of about 500 kilotons. We have hot-wired this one for you with a simple timer to bypass the permissive action link, which I have been instructed to show you how to use. Congratulations, you two are now a nuclear power, and everyone is cool with this. Dr. J, I believe you suggested this yourself, and the President has signed off on it. We are committed to doing everything we can to prevent the destruction of any inhabited world, not just Earth." As he was showing us how to program the bomb timer, our curator showed up. "I've been told you are cleared for everything," our instructor said without elaboration, and he continued our instruction. "I don't know what we're supposed to do with it. We have no way to launch it on an intercept course without being detected and evaded and maybe destroyed in the process." "That much is correct," the curator said. "We are now certain the rate of change is armed with a primitive version of your sunlight cannon, and due to its heavier construction you would not prevail in a sunlight cannon battle. If you get much closer than an astronomical unit to them via your fold drive, they will detect your presence and be able to either engage you or flee. Then, like I said, what are we supposed to do with this? My people may be able to give you some assistance. Take this." He offered us what looked for all the world like a locket. "When you get within a couple of light years of Kattegat and your relative velocity less than about 50 kilometers per second, your calibrated fold drive should be capable of doing that from Neptune in one fold. Open this and press the button. This will alert our agent on Kattegat of your arrival. We are setting up a strategy as you fly." 10 minutes later we were in the air. 30 minutes later we were falling toward Neptune, and 7 hours later M opened the locket and pressed the button. Within moments we were joined by a raider. But when this raider spoke, its translator just put out English without any raider growling to translate. "We have met before," she said. "I am one who walks among our children. You were watching over us on our last visit to Kattegat," M said. "Exactly. This is quite a situation. We would resolve it ourselves. But long ago we gave up the building of ships, and so while our command of the fold is very accurate, we have become a bit limited in the ability to fold larger objects and dependent on folding to an inhabitable space. Thank you for bringing one." "Hey, it's the least we could do," I said. "How are we going to do this?" "We are tracking the rate of change as it approaches. It has to use inhabited worlds as waypoints, and we walk among our children with our fold detectors on all of those worlds. We anticipate it to arrive here in about another 8 hours. They aren't stopping to lick the scree. It should appear within 10 to 15 light years of us, and they will have to do another reckoning before folding over to one of the Kattegat system's gas giants to correct velocity. We should have about 20 minutes to act." The raider described the plan to us, and M said it was a thing of martial beauty. "Even with our superior technology, we are out-armored, outgunned, and cannot fold very close without blowing our cover," she said. "If they don't destroy us, they simply fold away before we can do anything. But this is a plan." Later, the raider simply said, "They are here. Range 0.7 light years." Our fold drive control console lit up and coordinates entered themselves. "How did you do that?" M said. "Just execute the fold. I could do it myself, but you are the captain of this vessel. It will put us about 1.5 AU from the rate of change, outside of their detection radius for your fold drive." M executed the fold. At this range, the alien ship still wasn't even visible, but the raider knew exactly where it was. "Our time is short," she said. "And I need a bit of it," she said, closing her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Feeling the interior layout of the civilian ship. You can map the interior layout of their ship from here." She opened her eyes. "How do you think we fold between the surfaces of worlds light years apart?" "I'm ready." "Enable the timer and set it for 90 seconds. "You have got to be fucking kidding." "Our time is short," she said again, and I set the timer. Moments later, the raider touched the bomb, and then both she and the bomb disappeared. 45 seconds after that, the raider returned without the bomb. "I think I've given it good placement to make sure the planet-killing drone is thoroughly destroyed. The carrier ship will be very heavily damaged, but I'm uncertain whether its fold drive will be completely disabled. These are very massive and solid objects. You're sure they didn't detect your folding? We know the limits of their processes very exactly, having made the components ourselves. Nanite-based fold drives cannot detect our activity at all. Moments later, the raider said, "The bomb has gone off. It has seriously disrupted them." "I don't see anything," I said. "It will take about 12 minutes for the light to reach us here," M said. While we were waiting, the raider said, "There is still fold activity. They are trying to execute a detuned fold. They aren't close enough to anything for it to couple with reliably, but they are trying different configurations. We need to finish destroying them." She put coordinates into our fold drive again. "Fold into here, about 500,000 kilometers range. Their damaged drive won't be able to detect yours at that range, and we will be able to see and gauge the extent of destruction." M folded us in. We folded inward past the shell of radiation and blinding light, and were still well outward of the larger ejected wreckage. The rate of change had been built in the form of a regular octahedron with rounded vertices, and each facet had a large movable mirror mounted at its center. Through the telescope we could see that one of its corners had been blown completely off, and what was inside was glowing ominously. "Those big mirrors are their sunlight cannons," the raider said. "If we fold over to face the destroyed vertex at close range, they won't be able to target us, and we will be able to target the deep interior of the ship. Won't there be a lot of debris? There's only a quarter-inch of aluminum between us and the vacuum of space. As with the light and radiation, hopefully we will fold past all that." "Hopefully. This is war," M said, and she used the sunlight RCS to exactly match velocity and orient us, then executed the fold. We all donned welding goggles and strapped in case the gravity plating should fail. The interior of the fold ship was a seething mass of molten structural material, but the center had been somewhat shielded by the mass of the ship. "I'm drilling it," M said, and she opened up the cannon. "They have redoubled their efforts at fold configurations. At this close range, even their damaged drive can detect what we are up to," the raider curator said. "They are trying to target us. We became aware of bits of debris flashing to incandescence around us and dinging our hull, but we were well in the shadow of the ship to all their functional cannons. Our ship was also buffeted by gas and debris from the hole M was drilling, but she used the RCS to hold us steady. After about 2 minutes, there was a flare from inside the fold ship. "Fold activity has ceased," the raider said. "I suggest retreat." We folded back to our observation position and watched. Finally, the raider nodded. "Their fold drive is dead. If any of them remain alive, they won't be for long." That was the first point in the encounter when it occurred to me that we had just killed a few thousand sapient beings. People like us in many ways. But I knew M would remind me that they were enemies that were trying to kill us too, in spectacularly genocidal fashion. "How sure are we?" M asked. "We've gone through too much here to let them slip away. As far as my instruments can tell, their sunlight cannons should also be dead." M folded back and resumed drilling. She didn't stop until the entire fold ship split into 3 pieces, forced apart by the pressure of boiling gases from within. "I can now verify that their fold drive is fully destroyed," the raider said. "Okay, thanks for the help. No need for that, we curators bear." "Oh shit." "What?" "We've taken damage. We're leaking air and fuel cell oxygen, and I'm not sure about the control surfaces and propellers." We all went back into the cargo area, which had windows. The wings were pockmarked with dents and tears, and 2 of the 4 propellers were missing at least 1 blade. "We're in bad shape," M announced. "I don't think I can get it to the surface of a planet like this. We might not even make it through the velocity adjustment at Neptune with these leaks." "There is no need," the curator said. "Can you execute 1 more fold to get us just a bit closer to Kattegat?" The fold drive is one thing that does still seem to be working for now. A few minutes later we held hands and closed our eyes. And when we opened them, we were safe in front of the Earth Embassy on Kattegat, as our faithful ship mail service burned up crashing into one of its seas. We rushed to the door of the embassy and knocked, fortunately getting their attention and gaining entrance before anyone outside noticed us. There were only a few embassy personnel present at that time, but M knew 2 of them personally, and they expressed shock at our arrival because they were certain they knew of every human on Kattegat. We hustled off to the embassy's most private communications room and arranged a hasty microfold call to Earth. There M, the Raiderform curator, and I each told our stories 4 times to successively higher-level officials. Our audience for the last retelling included the President of the United States and the highest leaders of several of our allies. "What do the curators recommend?" the director asked of our curator, without mentioning that one of the humans on his end was actually also a curator. "The Raiders are a proud people who will be strongly tempted to react in kind. We have been inclined to forgive what they did in their attack on you, because it was unintended, and the result of your surprise show of force. and they seem to be as horrified as everyone else and have directed their space captains to make sure it never happens again. But the possibility of this escalating is strong, and we must not allow that. We will have the same problem here on Earth, someone who sounded an awful lot like the president said. The number of people who know about this is still very limited. Keeping a lid on it should still be possible. We still have to deal with the civilians. The civilians are our children, and we reserve the right to discipline them in our own way. We need to find out how deep this rot goes into their culture. It is wasteful to fell the tree if only one branch is diseased. We need assurance that the problem is completely contained. I believe we can achieve that, came a voice from Earth we recognized as our human form curator. We should chat a bit offline before finalizing decisions. That seemed to inspire general agreement. After we ended the call, the Raider form curator reminded us, "You two are still rock stars here. Everyone will go crazy if they find out you have returned. And that's even without considering that you just saved their world. We should depart as soon as possible. Our fold ship Edge of Space is on the roof of the power station and scheduled to return to Earth this afternoon. If we could quietly get M and J to the ship, they could just take a stateroom and be on Earth within a day. I can get them there discreetly," the Raider said. She offered us her hands, and moments later we were on the ship. Edge of Space was a converted Boeing 747, and the captain showed us to a well-appointed room where we could safely hide from everyone else who was scheduled to fly with us. That gave us a chance to grab some sleep and some more entertaining not sleep before touching down at JFK. Our human form curator was there to meet us, and after we ducked into a hidden corner of the airport, he folded us over to the Fold project base. If the rest of Earth and Kattegat were blissfully unaware of our brushes with genocide, the base was a beehive of activity. We had folded into the area where the fold inhibitor and span limiter had been built, and technicians were swarming over the inhibitor. "What the hell is going on?" M asked. "We have engaged in one of your human rituals and made a purchase from you. We have offered a price for which to buy your fold inhibitor. We got a good deal because we had basically told you we wouldn't let you use it yourselves anyway." "And what did you pay us for it?" "Full technical theory of the operation of gravity plating. We offer a guarantee that you will be able to manufacture your own with your known existing manufacturing techniques and no use of nanites." "That sounds fair," M said. "Indeed, we expect it will lead you to a few more things. Meanwhile, we have an immediate use for the inhibitor and no time to build our own." "Seville?" "Yes. Our agents there report that the general public has no knowledge of what was done in their name. Action must be taken, but we hope that genocidal methods can be avoided this time. Here, we need to clear a space." At his direction, everyone backed away from an area of the floor and a machine folded into it. It wasn't very big, and had the kind of gleaming, perfect construction one might expect from molecular nanoassembly. Two aliens of different semi-humanoid species stepped out of it, and one of them presented our curator with what looked like a metal link belt. Both of them sported the mark of the Curators prominently, one on its forehead and the other on its lower back. "More of our agents," our curator said. "These are machines we use when we are terraforming and need to fold large apertures or work from uninhabitable spaces." The new aliens took some measurements of the span limiter and spoke with our curator in alien tongue for a few moments. Then they got in their space pod and folded out. "They will be arranging an operating environment and power supply for it," our curator said. "On Seville? No, that would be too vulnerable. Deep below the surface of Seville's moon. I thought of the effort that had been necessary for humans to reach our own moon without the fold drive. With the inhibitor operating, the civilians would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy and incapable of reaching the thing that was cutting them off. I almost felt sorry for them for a moment. "So what's the belt for?" I asked innocently. "It's an amplifier for our personal fold drives, which are normally tuned for an aperture the size of our bodies. I can fold my own body about 100 light-years and cancel the likely velocity differences I'd find at that range with my implanted drive. But if I hold your hands and include you in the aperture, my range drops to a light-year or so, and my ability to cancel velocity drops too. I would not be able to get your fold inhibitor to your own moon on my own, much less to Seville's. But with this, I can fold an asteroid halfway across the galaxy, or an entire rocky planet a good distance across its solar system. These are the tools we use to explore and create new inhabitable worlds." "That sounds insanely dangerous," I said. "Only curators with implanted drives can use these tools, and only when properly unlocked. We restrict access to those who have a need for them. I will be returning this when we have taken care of the current situation." "You keep these on your homeworld?" M asked. At this, the curator hesitated. "No," he said with a hint of emotion. "Our homeworld was destroyed eons ago when our home star, which was much like your Sol, entered the next phase of its stellar evolution and became a red giant. Surely you could have saved it." "That was considered," he said heavily. "But if we moved it to a new orbit, it would no longer be harmonically tuned to our system's other worlds. Our leaders then realized that there are some things in the cosmos that simply end. By that time we were quite capable of walking among our children undetected, and we decided to move into the garden we'd spent so much effort to create. We have caches all over the galaxy of tools we might need once in a while, and of course we continue to do what we have always done and create new inhabitable worlds. Do you remember your home world? Oh no, we can live a very long time. I personally met one of the team who arranged your Earth's KT Impactor event. But home was swallowed by our sun more than 4 billion of your years ago. It's not that we remember our home, but that we don't really have one at all now. You met someone who helped wipe out the dinosaurs. Is he still on Earth? Oh no, he was part of the long-term evolution team. They were the ones who decided life had settled into an unuseful equilibrium and made the decision to disrupt it. Once it became clear that one of your ancestral species was likely to enter the critical path, they all moved out for other projects. I was part of the new team to foster critical path development. More experts came in as your ancestors approached, entered, and ascended the path. And of course there are other teams that specialize in early solar system engineering to make stable orbits and stabilizing moons for habitable worlds, and then for seeding and nurturing early life. When did you come to Earth? Relatively recently, about 300,000 years ago. But humans are my 5th professional project. You're going to make a mark on my resume, too. I was about to say something when 2 of M's pilot friends recognized her and hailed us. So you two slew the deadly fold ship again, one of them said. Getting to be a bad habit, M said modestly. Well, we took care of the one here. Even brought our ship back in one piece. Good thing, too, since it was Grasshopper. You two flew my ship. It's the only one with both the sunlight cannon and the new manually adjustable aperture fold drive. I thought we were going to nuke them. After you left, some of the bigwigs got cold feet about that. We reviewed what you guys did to the Raiders and decided to try drilling it with the sunlight cannon instead. When it stopped retrying the bad fold, we enveloped it and folded it into a collision course with Venus. Venus, I said. Why not the sun or the moon? Moon's too accessible, the other pilot said nonchalantly. Didn't want anyone trying to pick up the pieces and put it back together. Sun would have taken too long, a month or more to fall in depending on how close we dared folding in to leave it. With Venus, we could fold into the planet's nighttime shadow, RCS away from the enemy drone, fold just ourselves out, and an hour later whatever's left of it after impact is melting on the surface. Smooth, M said. And we brought your ship back in one piece, the first pilot repeated. Well, your target didn't have 2 fold drives and wasn't shooting at you. A little while later, one of the human technicians approached us. I was told to tell you when we were ready, sir, he said to the curator. Is the away installation team ready to depart? Yes, sir. Have them stand on top of the inhibitor with all the parts and tools they will need for the installation, as if we are preparing for a group photo. I'll join you shortly. He turned to us. I'd like the 2 of you to come with us if you can, he said. There are truths that must be penetrated at Seville before we activate this machine, and your presence would probably help. The inhibitor itself was about 3 meters high and 10 meters across. We all climbed the stairs and stood atop it. Our curator looked at his belt with a hint of a smile and raised his arms. Then the whole machine and all of us were in a new space much more brightly and evenly lit, and we were a lot less heavy. We, the machine, and the whole crew and their tools had folded to a new world without falling toward an attractor to adjust velocity, without using a RCS to adjust our orientation, and without doing any course corrections. We were in a freshly made cavern with life support and power on Seville's moon, over 80 light-years from Earth, and we had folded in with a large machine to make perfect contact with the floor in one seamless step. The technicians fanned out to begin their tasks with quiet confidence. They weren't being shot at, and they had a well-defined job to complete. There were other aliens present of various form, all of whom turned out to actually be curators, who assisted and began suggesting modifications, which the technicians carefully considered. The inhibitor itself is basic silicon substrate and by design redundant, our human form curator told us. But your power supplies use some components which might not have the longevity we seek. Fortunately, we have the technology at hand to bypass those and power the silicon directly. Where's the power coming from? Photovoltaic nanite network on the surface with a storage layer for the lunar night. It's still knitting out but should be done before nightfall, and it's already adequate for direct power in the day. Unlike the technicians who were nodding and pointing to connection points, Em and I had no real idea why we were there. New curators of different form popped in and out from time to time, and after an hour or so a civilian appeared. Also one of ours, our curator said before we could ask. Greetings, old friend Scree. And yourself. I haven't seen you since you helped us get these guys through the path. You worked on the Seville project. Em asked our curator. Oh, yes. In that day I walked among them as Scree here does now. Quite a different experience. Senses are senses, the civilian form curator said. And in this case, senseless is senseless. It is also a pun in civilian, our curator said to Em and me. So what's it like down there? Nobody knows about it. The Xenocide project has been kept under a tight lid of secrecy by those who moved it forward. Many of the acts they performed to get it done were obviously criminal under civilian law. The resources they diverted to create the death drones have already created an economic recession, and many people have been trying to figure out why it's happening. Well, they're about to find out. Maybe what we're doing here is a little harsh, I suggested. We have discussed this at our highest levels all across the galaxy, the civilian said. An example must be made. Do they have any assets off-system? Not many. Both of their remaining fold ships are in orbit now. They have a few individuals on other worlds, but not enough to establish a stable colony, should anyone even let them try. We consulted with the technicians. The conversion and installation was almost complete. The human-built power supplies and control panel had been completely bypassed. The inhibitor would be activated by a timer of Curator design. Are all our people off-world? Actually, a lot of them have elected to stay. We have made sure they understand there will be no back door past the inhibitor, but this is also galactic history being made, and they want to bear witness. And the expected blackout duration isn't that long for us. How long are you going to shut them out? Long enough to make an impression. Their Grand Council is in session. I think it's about time to crash it. Humans, if you don't mind. He extended his hands, and Em and I each took one. Moments later, we were in an auditorium full of civilians, obviously engaged in the business of state. Em and I were hearing translation even though we weren't wearing obvious translation hardware. What is the meaning of this? One civilian shouted. Who are these aliens, and how have they appeared in our chamber? We have come to judge you, the civilian curator said. And while the translation was calm, the original sounds it was making boomed through the chamber. Guards! The doors won't open! 6 civilians advanced on us with weapons drawn. Our curators looked at one another and waved their arms, and the weapons dissolved into dust. I did not know you could do that, I muttered. We couldn't do it to you, our human form curator muttered back. But you know how your people have been wondering if we put back doors into the nanite technology. Now you know. One of the representatives slowly approached us as everyone else was backing away, and I realized it was my original contact, Kay, who had once made an appointment with a well-known but not very space-savvy human dermatologist. Not possible, Kay said. What manner of trickery is this? Are you human, Jay? Yes, I said as the chamber went quiet. It was a riot of color as the representatives reacted to the situation and their dermis announced their feelings. You are dead, Kay shouted. It looked at Em. And you? And you? How are you here? That is what we are here to explain. How many of your colleagues know of these? Above our heads, a holographic display appeared of the 2 death drones at station. There was much muttering in the chamber. You know what they are, I said to Kay. Of course I do, it spat. You excreted on the equilibrium of our galaxy. You rewarded our enemies with powerful technology and brought them to our door. You are spreading through the unclaimed worlds of our galaxy like vermin. We did what was necessary. What did you do? Several voices said from the gallery. We exterminated the vermin, Kay said. These will be among the last of their kind. As it should be. They made a realization they thought was quite clever, but like almost everything, it's not as new as they thought, the curator said. A fold drive whose only purpose is to detune and fold a planet into its star does not need to be manned to perfect its calibration. So they built 2 dedicated planet-killing drones and sent one to Earth and the other to Kattegat, the homeworld of those you call the Raiders. And how did they fund this murderous extravagance? You will probably find that much of it was illegal and has caused your current economic downturn. It doesn't matter, Kay spat. We did what had to be done. And you failed, Em said. Our team stopped you at Earth, and Jay and I ambushed your ship Rate of Change and destroyed it before it could deliver the other drone to Kattegat. Lies. We have the sunlight cannon now. At this, a gasp went up from the chamber. Your ships have hulls of gossamer. How could you possibly prevail against one of our capital ships? We didn't use the sunlight cannon. We used a hydrogen bomb. The curators helpfully put up a projected image of the Rate of Change with its blown-off apex and the ominous glow from within. Another gasp from the chamber. You are abominations, Kay shouted, and several civilians came forward to restrain it before it could attack us. We created you, the civilian form curator said to the chamber. We formed your world from the cosmic dust, gave it a moon and the right conditions for life to thrive. We seeded your world with life and we guided it, forming your tree of life and your genus and your ancestral species. We gave you encouragement to evolve intelligence and in time language and writing and science and technology. We gave you nanites and the fold drive. And you have thanked us for our gifts by using them to try to murder our other children. There was a ripple in the chamber as someone with obvious authority descended from the audience to the dais. Your power is obvious, it said. Most of us did not know of this transgression which was done in our name. What are your intentions? The last time this happened was over 1 billion years ago, the civilian form curator said. In that case, it started a planet-folding war. We had to end it by folding 20 worlds into their stars ourselves to fully cure the disease. We will do whatever we can to atone. You have the humans to thank for the fact that you are still alive. They have given us a new option. There will be hardship, but your kind will have a second chance. I know my people will ask why we are being punished, but not those of Kattegat who did fold one of your worlds into its sun. That was the act of a desperate crew who were surprised by an existential threat they did not expect. And the world they folded did not harbor a critical path species or post-critical path civilization. Their leaders were horrified to learn of what happened and quickly instructed their space captains to make sure it must never happen again. And the humans exercised mercy, and without our encouragement decided to rectify the problem by solving the problem that made the raiders become raiders in the first place, their starvation for raw materials, rather than exacting revenge. Meanwhile, even though you had never even been attacked, your leaders devoted significant resources to the purpose of genocide. They had not been surprised and knew just what they were doing. In that case, we gratefully accept your decision to grant us a second chance. May I ask just what our hardship will be and for how long? You will find out its form soon enough. As for the duration, we will see if 1,000 of your years gives you time to reflect on what was done in your name. As Em and I were still sucking in our breath, our curator grabbed our hands and suddenly we were back on Seville's moon, where all the human technicians and aliens were gone. The curator activated a control panel and motioned for our hands again, saying, "Quickly!" Moments later, we were on a transparent glass surface elevated far above a desert landscape. "My mother brought me here when I was a child," Em said. "The Grand Canyon skywalk, isn't it?" "Yes, my people have a saying that when you have to do something ugly, you should remind yourself of something beautiful. Your people made this bridge purely for the purpose of celebrating the beauty of the world we gave you. This would have been lost if the civilians had succeeded in their plan." "It was just a few of them," I said. "It only takes a few and a lot more supporting and following them blindly, as your people learned over time. It's a terrible thing that it happened, but your people know genocide. The civilians don't. They are still able to think of it as a cleansing process. But as violent as humans can be, you have also learned the hard way just how much so much blood costs. You applied the same lesson to the raiders that you have applied to your own nations in recent time, and we are quite proud of you. We watched as the sun sank toward the horizon. How do we know the civilians will learn the same thing from their millennium of exile?" "Oh, we don't," he said as the twilight deepened. "But if they don't, there is always still Plan A." 4 years later. It had been 6 months with Em working on some super-secret project she couldn't even talk to me about, and me doing diplomatic missions. I'd learned to fly, and even though it wasn't official and I should have had no business going near an airplane, much less a starship, the director had decided on his own authority that my skills were sufficient to take control of a machine that cost tens of millions of dollars to build and guide it to the stars. The flying part was a little easier for me because when you're coming in from space, you can pick a landing spot that has good weather and daylight. Still, not all of the alien airstrips are up to human standards, so some care is necessary. But my function was mostly diplomatic and commercial. Humans weren't selling our #1 product, the miniature fold drive, to other races yet because it still cost us over $10 million to build one of them, and we were absorbing our own entire production of one every month or two. But we were using the ships we built to provide a service lots of races were willing to pay for, next-day delivery. For Aeons, the rule was that interstellar travel took about a month. The actual journey for the fold ship only took a day or two, but because the ships were so large and couldn't land, loading and unloading them from orbit could take weeks. It was an enormous logistical nightmare that nobody had ever really solved. But then along come humans who, for a price, can be there in less than a day, pick up your load, whether it be emergency disaster relief or guests for a royal wedding, and have you to your destination in just a few more hours. We had far more requests for business than we had ships to provide service, and about 40 human employees just working on appropriate methods of payment that we could usefully accept. Most of the galaxy didn't use money, and we had to establish products and raw materials that made sense as barter. We also had people working on what we were pretty sure would become a galactic bank, because the barter thing was becoming such a pain in the ass. But now Em was done with her secret mission, and we had some time together. When I met her, I saw that our friendly human form curator was already there too. "You said you had something really special to show me," I teased. "I thought it would involve less clothes." "Later for that. We can always boink, but you don't always see the first of a new generation of starship." Em led us out behind the hangar where a really strange craft was parked. It had 3 somewhat normal-looking aircraft hulls linked by connecting tunnels and struts, and it was sitting on pylons instead of wheeled landing gear. "The good ship Trinity," Em said by way of introduction. "I thought you were an atheist," the curator said. She's named after the character from The Matrix. So our next level interstellar craft is a trimaran. I teased. M laughed. You should be so glad you weren't involved with those discussions. We're obviously still using a lot of aircraft parts because they are readily available. But Trinity was never an airplane. Cylinders are still the second best shape for a pressure containment vessel that has to maintain atmospheric pressure in space. We could have used a single bigger one, but that would have been more vulnerable. Trinity's 3 hulls can be isolated from one another. We have been in shooting wars, remember? All 4 connecting tunnels can be isolated and used as airlocks. Her primary piloting station is in the center hull with the large transparent forward hemisphere. But she can be piloted from anywhere by wire, and the safety glass windows in the side hulls are much stronger than the primary cockpit transparent dome. She's a prototype, and in this form her left hull is configured for passenger service and her right hull for cargo with a C-130 style rear cargo door. The middle hull is propulsion, engineering, and logistics. How does she get to the ground without wings? I asked. The curator smiled as M answered. You know, our biggest surprise at getting our payment for the Seville fold inhibitor is that gravity plating is yet another fold application. It's like the microfold we use for communication and the sunlight cannon and power reactor, but it is even more restrictive and only passes gravitons. We had no proof gravitons even existed, and now we're using them. I thought it would take a particle accelerator the size of a solar system to detect them, I said. It did, the curator said. So gravity plating scarfs up gravitons from all sources through a really detuned microfold, as does levitation plating, which is gravity plating turned upside down and backward, which is what powers the flying cars. But we realized that we could use the same principle in a tuned fashion, since we're making our own fold hardware. So we can make a gravity microfold to some place with really usefully intense gravity flux, like a neutron star. Trinity doesn't have to fold out to Neptune and fall to adjust its velocity. It can fold Neptune's gravity to wherever it is. And even better, it can fold the gravity of the sun or a neutron star or black hole to wherever it is. Trinity can accelerate at over 100 gravities. Once we have the controls perfected, it should be able to take off from Earth, match velocity with Kattegat, fold over and land in about an hour. That sounds a bit dangerous, I said. Actually, it isn't, the curator said. We once made ships similar to this. Since the gravity field affects all particles of the ship equally, there are no tidal forces or internal acceleration. Should the drive fail, the ship would simply stop accelerating. There is no hazard of mismatched correction. And the graviton microfold doesn't pass any of the other extreme environmental hazards. Have you done any of this stuff yet? Space trials only, M said. I wanted to offer both of you the chance to be with me for the first real journey. I accept gratefully, the curator said. And I guess I do too. Because it was on relatively short shock-absorbing pylons instead of tall landing gear. Trinity's connecting tunnel hatches folded down into staircases that neatly met the ground. Where are we going? I asked as M fired up the ship's systems. I was going to ask for suggestions. I do have one, the curator said. Do you have pressure suits on board? Of course. I have been asked to do an errand which would normally involve bothering those curators who are keepers of our powerful technology. But if this ship can land on an airless world, we could let them sleep. Well, that sounds like a good idea. Let's start by landing on a closer airless world. We sat in the jump seats behind M in the center fuselage piloting station. Trinity arose silently from the surface of the Earth, then tilted upward and shot forward vertically for a few minutes until we were in the blackness of space. No fold maneuvers were necessary to divest ourselves of Earth's air. When we were well into space, M folded us out to Earth's moon. At the moon, we adjusted velocity in seconds and descended, until we were looking at the descent stage and flag of an Apollo mission. I'm not going to actually touch down and desecrate this place. I wouldn't have come here at all if I had to use thrusters to descend. But this is the landing place of Apollo 17. We are the first people to see it with our own eyes since Cernan and Schmidt left here in 1972. This is a great honor, our curator said, and I think he meant it. Where do we go from here? I asked. If I may, the curator said. There is an outer world in the Seville system where I have a chore to do. It is well outside of the reach of your fold inhibitor, which is why it is there. M folded us off to the Seville system. At the curator's directive, she homed in on a spot on its 4th rocky planet, a frozen wasteland similar to Ceres. There was a modest-sized machine on the surface with a small array of stick antennas. After we touched down, the curator suited up, went out to the device and touched it with an object he had brought with him. Minutes later, he was back in the ship. That's our back-channel relay, he said after unsuiting. The natives have no knowledge of it. It's entirely for the use of our stay-behind curators. But they had been getting some interference from local radio transmissions. We had quite forgotten to give our people the ability to reprogram its frequency profile remotely, since we're kind of used to being able to get to these things in person. The program update I just performed fixes that for them. You've been getting updates from Seville. What the hell has been happening there? Let's go somewhere that serves alcohol to discuss that. My agents have told me of an excellent pub on Kattegat, and I hear the two of you have no need to pay for drinks on that world. Of course, the space traffic directors at Kattegat expected us to need the roof of the power station for a rolling landing, and they were surprised when we asked for a courtyard of modest dimensions in the city near a certain trendy address. This was quickly arranged, and it was indeed about an hour after the curator updated his relay that we touched down in a small vacant lot between two very Earth-like wooden buildings. We walked around a few corners and found the pub. Over large glasses of rich fermented beverage, the curator told us what had happened after the inhibitor went online. Nearly all of the power failed, of course, he said. We get used to using the full-drop repeaters because, like hydroelectric, they work all the time. But nanites can also make good photovoltaic and supercapacitor power storage stations. The civilians knew their hardship was a punishment and did not waste time lamenting it. They set about dismantling their now useless full-drop repeaters and building solar fields and batteries. Most of the planet was without power for less than a year, and they managed to save that year's agricultural crops so there was no famine. I'm glad that there wasn't a lot of death, I said. Well, the crews of the two orbiting fold ships had no way home. As you now know, the repulsor plating is fold-based. They said their goodbyes via radio and opened the airlocks, and the leaders who had created the Xenocide program were publicly tried and put to death. The civilians had not imposed the death penalty for thousands of years, but they found this particular crime a bit over the top. And of course there were the minor tragedies you would expect as people found themselves in flying transports that could no longer fly and similar situations. Still, it was a very small percentage of their global population. Do you know what happened to Kay? Not specifically, but I would be very surprised if it was not put to death with the rest of the would-be xenocides. Our repeater doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. It only functions at all about 30% of the time due to astrophysical alignments, and manages about 10 bits per second best case when it does. We're limited because our ground agents are pretending to be amateur radio operators, and don't have proper radio telescope dishes. So we mostly get what amount to newspaper clippings. So what are things like now, 4 years later? M asked. Civilian civilization has mostly recovered from the insult. They were a self-sufficient world before we gave them the fold, and they are self-sufficient again now without it. You may recall the elder gentle being who came down from the balcony to challenge us. It was their supreme leader many years ago, and after we folded out it was reappointed by acclamation. It led the trials of the Xenocides and the organization of replacement networks for the infrastructure disabled by the fold inhibitor. It also kept up awareness that a great wrong had been attempted in their name, for which they all had responsibility. The result has been similar to the situation in your country of Germany after the unpleasantness of your Second World War. There is a subpopulation of diehards who would kill anything that disagrees with them on general principle, but they are a small minority and not generally tolerated. The official and popular view is that they were betrayed by leaders who misled them and attempted to make them all agents of murder, and that this cannot ever be tolerated. It will be interesting to see how well this attitude persists across future generations. I still think we are maybe being a bit too harsh making them live with it for 1,000 years. Well, it's done, the curator said. How would you propose to disable it? It's deep beneath the surface of an airless world shielded by the inhibitor itself. If you get within 2 astronomical units of it, your ship becomes a flying brick. Right. We talked a bit more, then made our way back to the ship, which was now surrounded by a small crowd of local raiders. At our approach, there was a collective, "Ooh!" And as we opened the hatch, one of the kittens said, "How did you get it here?" "You'll see very soon," M said mischievously. "Thanks for saving our world," he added. The secret hadn't lasted long. Fortunately, none of them recognized us as individuals. Just promise us that if you're ever in the position to do it for another people, you'll do the same yourselves. At that, the crowd did their stomping salute, and we stomped back as we'd learned to do on our first visit. Then we closed the hatch and lifted off in perfect silence while they gaped, and in less than an hour we were back on Earth eating dinner.